Carolyn?
Okay. Hi there. Welcome to our Hangout for the week, and I hope everyone is doing well. I am keeping my eye on the DALMOOC Twitter stream, so feel free to post questions or even just say hi. We'll be happy to hear from you. I have also been staying on top of the discussion forums to see how people are doing. I was happy not to see any more installation issues with Lightside. I have here Gaurav. I wanted to introduce him to all of the students out there. He's the one who's been keeping the Quick Helper up and running all this time, and he wanted to say a few words, so I think I'll let him go ahead and say hi.
Yeah, hello everyone. So, as most of you must be knowing by now, that the Quick Helper, which you see at the bottom of all your course pages, is a facility to seek help from your other fellow students in the course. But I would like to know that it is also an opportunity to the selected helpers to offer help to their fellow students. So many of you must be receiving emails these days which are inviting you to a post in the discussion forum to offer response to a question asked by one of the other fellow students. So I will encourage all of you to use this facility of Quick Helper to seek help and invite helpers. But uh, but you should rather avoid broadcasting information or starting a discussion thread using Quick Helper, for which general discussion forum is a more appropriate place. So like recently, one of the students posted a website link using Quick Helper and also invited some helpers. So the intention was to offer help to some other students, like all the other students in the course, but I think Quick Helper is not the appropriate facility to use that. Rather, such things should be posted on the discussion forum, because if you post using Quick Helper, the emails goes to the selected helpers, which may be spams at times when it's not actually a question, but rather a discussion or a broadcasting information meant for all of you. So irrespective of that, I will encourage all of you to keep using this help intervention facility available to all of you to invite helpers, and so that your questions do not remain unanswered, which is the case in most of the other discussion forums.
Great, thank you. Interestingly, Gaurav is actually going through the unit on text mining alongside all of you students, and I'm going to ask Gaurav what he's thinking of the material. I haven't actually seen a lot of substantive questions so far to the discussion forum. I'm looking forward to more substantive questions as you all get into the activities, but let me just ask Gaurav how he's holding up.
Yeah, so now I'm also one of your fellow students, and so we can interact with each other about the material we will be going through this week. So I have came back to school after a long time. I studied text mining long before, and it will be sort of a revision for me. So and the item, so the material available looks really good to me because it talks about sentiment analysis, and sentiment analysis is something I was always looking forward to learn. So yeah, and then we have this opportunity to use this research tool called Lightside, so which is a pretty good tool to do anything we want to do for text mining and data mining. Yeah, so yeah, looking forward to use it even more and do the assignments and the exercises.
So how did it go for you, Gaurav, getting Lightside installed on your computer? Did you have any issues?
I didn't face any issues while installing it. It was pretty much straightforward. So the best key to install Lightside on your system is to just go through the user manual available. It has been very well documented, and if you just follow the steps highlighted there for different operating systems, it should be really straightforward to install it.
So I did see a couple of posts to the discussion forum yesterday with students who had a little bit of trouble getting LightSight installed on their computer, and Oliver, who's a postdoc working here at CMU, tried to respond to those emails, or actually not emails, but posts to the discussion forum. We really hope that the issues got resolved. One student did start a new thread mentioning that the issues that he or she was facing had gotten resolved, but we weren't sure if a second student who participated in the thread, whether their issues also got resolved. So we want to really encourage students, if you're having trouble out there, please let us know, because we're here to help you. We want you ultimately to feel successful in the course.
And I would like to add, like, if you're still facing issues, I think the first thing you can try is to make sure your JDK version is compatible with LightSight. That is the problem most of the times people face, and once that's resolved, I don't think so there should be any other issue in installing it.
Great. Yeah, I use it in my course every semester here, and there are about 70 students per semester who take the course, and I rarely encounter students who are not able to get it installed. So interestingly, another student who is working with me here at CMU went through to find out everything that he could see in discussions from this MOOC where people talked about their background, so we could find out what kind of knowledge are people bringing into this course. We were really curious, actually, as we were designing the course, whether we were targeting it appropriately for the audience. And we were really excited to see we've got teachers, we've got administrators, but we've got doctors and nurses also. And there were a lot of data scientists, but not necessarily from a learning field. People who have sophisticated knowledge of data mining and statistics, but just hadn't seen it applied in a learning setting. At the same time, we have people from education and psychology who don't have a statistics or data mining kind of foundation, and they understand the learning side, but really want to get better grounded in computational methodologies. So it was kind of nice to see the great variety that we have among our students. And at the end of the course, we'll be really interested to get feedback from each of you about what you felt connected with you, your goals, and your background, and what you think could have been a better match. So Dragon, you're there. Why don't you let us know kind of what's your perception of how things are going this week? Have you noticed any interesting issues coming up on the discussion forum? It sounds to me like some people are still working on the social network analysis. I saw some posts on that. So would you like to comment on your impressions about the course this week?
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. And I think that this is really interesting to what even Graf's observation earlier. He said that he joined the students in weeks 7 and 8 to get some insights into text mining, or better to say, to brush up his skills in text mining, which is actually quite interesting notion. In a way, we can see that the course is composed on basically 4 chunks, and students are welcome to go through four of them, but on the other hand, they can just jump on either of these 4, and in a way it tells us how flexible course itself is in terms of the prerequisites and how much it builds on the previous elements. Of course, week 1 and 2 were quite useful to just get better understanding for data analysis and data analytics in general, but then for all of those students who have some background in that, well, that probably week 1 and 2 wasn't that useful or necessary, better to say. And then basically the rest of the course is something that can be attended based on the students' interests and needs. And that's why it's not really so surprising to see that some students are still working or jumping into weeks 3 and 4. Social network analysis, although those weeks were finished so much time ago. In any case, I mean, in terms of the general questions, I think week 7, it seems that it's much smoother in terms of like overall content and the issues that students might be having with technology. Obviously, problems are probably similar to what we experienced in week 3 when we had to install Gephi. And obviously, Gura already made a good point about the selection of Java. Unfortunately, we are using fortunately, we are using three great Java-based systems, but unfortunately, they are incompatible in terms of Java versioning. And it's quite unfortunate that these Java versions don't have these types of vertical compatibility between each other. They are introducing different types of new libraries or introducing different new versions of the same libraries and so on, and that creates a problem for installation. And there is no easy way to deal with that. So please bear with us. Try to check what version you always have on your machine of Java, and then try to accommodate that version. In some cases, that will pretty much mean that you need to uninstall the version that you presently have and install the new one. That's the only fix.
Wow.
It's a quick fix.
I didn't even know that, Dragon. I'm sorry to hear that there was that incompatibility issue. I didn't know, actually, that the other tools required a different version of Java. But I would like to point out that if you're using Windows, what you can do if you don't want to deinstall whatever version of Java you already have is use what's labeled on the tools page as the Java free version. It's not actually Java free, it just doesn't require that you have Java installed already on your computer. It's sort of packaged in. So it's a bigger download. It probably takes a little bit longer then to download. Hopefully you don't have a really slow internet connection, but then you should be able to run it regardless. Because it's all kind of right there, packaged in. So I haven't heard a lot of complaints. Hopefully students are okay. Oh, George, is that you?
Yeah, sorry, that's me, and sorry, folks. I'm a little bit in the background here. It's early morning in Berlin, and I don't have a great internet connection, so I've killed my video. But so I just want to mention to your question that you had asked, Carolyn, about where are things going and what's interesting. One of the interesting things, and I couldn't back this up other than anecdotally right now, but is that there's been a growing amount of participation with individuals who are sharing and detailing work on their blogs, and I've noticed this with the first week or two on when we were doing the DALMOOC tag. There was a fair bit of sort of orientation related questioning, and yet
George, are you there? Dragon, are you there?
Yeah, an example of the analysis work that
George,
I did.
cut out. Can you repeat yourself, please?
Oh, sorry, I'll keep my comments brief because of my connection. My point was the forums have slowed down in some regards, but it's been interesting to see that Twitter has picked up quite a bit for sharing of artifacts, and the questions have changed from saying detailed meta-level commentary on the course to actual, I created this analysis, or this is analysis I did, here it is. So I'm finding what's being shared on Twitter and on blogs, that's the only aspect of the course right now that actually seems to be increasing in interest. The other thing I noticed, just kicking off this week, there's something very appealing about text analysis. Maybe it's because we're textual people. I don't know what it is, but the excitement of people saying, "Oh, I love this stuff," or "This is an exciting week. I'm looking forward to this." It's actually fairly palpable both on Twitter, on blogs, and actually in the forums. So that's been an interesting transition.
Yeah, I was so happy to see that too, because it's obviously an area that's near and dear to my heart, so I'm happy that the enthusiasm is a little bit contagious, as some people have said. You know, I was really happy to see that people got the message that actually machine learning and data mining in general isn't magic, and that there's a lot of work to set up the data so that you can get something meaningful out of it with these tools. And in some ways, in the activities, we've made it easy by getting things mostly in shape before you even work with them. But text data is notorious for often you get it in a pile that's really not set up in an easy way to be able to start to do data mining, and you have to do a lot of cleanup and script writing and, you know, chopping and putting into a table before you can do something with it. So I was going to ask Dragon, actually, in his experience with social network analysis, is it the same story? Do you find that people are surprised by how much work they actually have to do to get to the place where they can run one of those analyses, or would you say that the kind of data that you tend to run social network analyses on is already kind of in a convenient form?
That's a great question, Carolyn, and I think many people really are unaware how much work it is actually behind even these relatively simple types of analysis, such as social network analysis. I would say that unlike, for example, text mining, that we need to do some data cleaning and pre-processing, actually the bulk of work is actually is left when to extra different types of features to start to play with the classifier itself or different types of analysis. I think for social network analysis, actually we spend much more time on extraction of social networks because there are so many different sources of social networks we can use. For example, discussion boards, and there is no like discussion board where I can just download the entire discussion board and import it immediately in Gephi. I wonder why we don't have that. I would say that that should be like a mandatory feature of any LMS or learning platform, or even any, if you wish, technology that we presently have. Why would we not be allowed to have something like that? But we don't, unfortunately. There are some tools like, for example, Snap, that Shane Dawson developed for social network analysis. But in many cases, for example, for Twitter, we need to spend a lot of time on different APIs. And then Twitter is also kind of limited in terms of the temporal availability of those data that can be used. The other thing is many people don't actually consider while Twitter has all these data in public, and even if it's temporarily expire, sharing these data and publishing these data somewhere else is not allowed according to their policy. So I can use it on my own home machine, and these data typically are even in many institutions not requested to have any ethics approval because they are in the public. Depends on an institution, of course, and the country. But then we basically spend a lot of time playing with that element. The other thing is, and some other researchers, and that's the touching point already with text mining and the work, Caroline, that you may have much more experience than I do, is, for example, there are some researchers who are looking into social network analysis, but actually by text mining, by looking who is talking to whom. So, for example, if I'm answering a message on discussion forum, I may be explicitly referencing to Caroline, but also George, Ryan, and several others. And that's basically the work done by Anatoly Gruz, and he developed this tool called, I think, Netlytics, which is used for exactly these types of things. And Caroline, I'm sure you can actually share a bit more insights in terms of the types of technologies that are used for that name entity resolution, and something that is very actually well developed in text mining and commonly used recently.
Oh yeah, so actually I would recommend people who are interested in this topic that they look at Jana Diesner's dissertation, because she did extensive work on looking at how different methods for setting up from text to do network analysis would affect how you would rank people in terms of some of these social network measures. And so how important was it, for example, to do an AFRA resolution before you did named entity resolution, or if you just missed all of those times that people referred sort of indirectly to somebody else or to a place, do you still come to ultimately the same kind of conclusions? And it all really depended on the level of granularity at which somebody cared about the conclusions that they were going to draw, because the people who are way at one end of the distribution will still be there even if there's some noise. But if it's important to get the gradation at the middle of the scale, that's where you really see the impact from some of these technologies and how accurate or inaccurate they are depending upon what kind of data you're applying them to. But I would like to actually also point out that in the field of machine learning now, there are some probabilistic versions of graph mining that are really exciting, that can actually take multiple layers of networks and think about them sort of simultaneously. What does that mean about how people are relating to each other? And even if you think about something like Twitter, it's well known that the reply network and the retweet network and the hashtag network have a very different structure. So it's all Twitter, same people in some sense, or accounts anyway, but different structure. And what's the real structure of Twitter then? Or is it some combination of all of these? And so how can you kind of integrate across these different networks? Or how can you look at who's talking to who, but how do they talk differently depending upon who they're talking to? And does that say something about the status of the link? And how can you jointly learn how to see connection and understand what the meaning behind the connection is with these kinds of frameworks? So there's a huge amount of research in this area, and still very many different models have been explored, and yet I think it's still wide open in a very active area of research. And so I think if students out there are interested in these topics, they can feel free to post questions to the discussion forum, and I think that we could provide a lot of links to more advanced ways of doing this work. And as long as I'm saying this, let me just admit to the entire crowd that I was really an outlier among the instructor team when we were designing this course. I really wanted to cover more advanced material, but some other people disagreed with me. They said, "Oh, you're a CMU professor. You just think too much like a CMU professor." And I was like, no, I think these students want to know, like, what's the cutting edge research out there that people who are actually developing new methods in data mining are doing, to be aware of that, and also to kind of go a little bit further with trying to even work with the tools so that they're challenged to see how far can you get with the simple aspect of it, and where do you hit that wall where actually you really need a lot more depth of insight, both into the methods and when they're applicable, but then also the data itself. So yeah, it's a short course, but if you show some inquisitiveness, I think we can accommodate you. So we would love to see those questions. So keep those questions coming in Twitter and the forums, and we'll do our best. So let me just raise another issue. I was very pleased with the kinds of reflections that people were posting to the discussion forums, and one student said something that really stuck with me all day today. It was this idea that when they were working on the predictive modeling unit, they were making this connection between my M&M analogy and their experience actually doing the predictive modeling, because they said that ultimately it was very difficult for them to do that work because they just didn't have the experience with that kind of data to know what would have been a reasonable representation. And so although they understood the idea that the representation matters for making the problem learnable, they didn't know how to actually move forward with that. And actually, I see that every semester in my machine learning class. When I finally get it across to students how important it is to have some insight into the data so that they can think in a meaningful way about the representation, then they realize, oh, but the problem is I don't really know this data that I'm working with, so what do I do? And then you're faced with, well, if it's not their area and this is just a term project, how can they really get the depth into whatever area the data came out of so that they can really do a meaningful piece of work in that space? So it works much better, of course, when I get students who have really, really deep domain knowledge and they really just need to get the idea of how you make a connection between what they know about their data and the sort of the range of kinds of representations that they have to play with. But it's much harder when you know something about the tools and technology, but you really don't have the domain insight. So yeah, I guess all I can say is push forward with learning about this stuff. George, what were you going to say?
Sorry, yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, how much of that do you think, from your experience and the students that you've worked with, how much of that is just spending enough time working with data? Like, is it just a matter of data familiarity in that domain? Because it's one of the difficulties, and you noted this, we had this discussion as we were designing the course, is how deep can you go? But at a certain point, it's just, from the way I would look at it at least, is there's really no shortcut to it. You just have to spend enough time working with the data. The tools are easy to learn in a lot of cases. It's just like it's easy enough to learn Microsoft Word, but it takes a lot of time to learn to write a good essay. And I think in that regard, having that dedicated time with similarly structured data sets can go a long way in helping to ramp up the cycle. But most of the data sets that have been shared in this course, there's been extensive pre-processing that's undergone that learners might not be aware of. It doesn't quite come to you in that kind of a sanitized state typically.
Yeah, so my area is language technologies, and I think you could spend your life just learning about linguistics and language choices and how they reflect identity issues and motivation and relationships and all these very subtle things that are important when especially if you're making a connection between something like social network analysis and language use. And so, I can introduce students to this and they read about it, but honestly, I think it takes years before it sinks in. And especially for students who come and they haven't really had much of a humanities, social science kind of foundation. So these ideas about theoretical frameworks and how these ideas work, and being able to look at a social situation and layer these frameworks on top of them and then use that to help you come up with ideas for how you would structure and represent the data. It's just incredibly hard. And it's also really hard after years and years and years of having read this stuff to remember what the world looked like before, because as you read and as you think about these things, it really changes you. And now all of a sudden you're not the same person and you can't remember what world you used to live in. And so I think that there's something about just spending a lot of time with the data that's absolutely necessary, but then I also just think that you can't shortchange yourself on just getting into the literature from people who have spent time looking at that data before, or other kinds of data like that, and what do they see? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's so much richness that's already known and having been seen. And even though it's the case, and here's another frustration that people coming into my area have, they read these really deep, really detailed qualitative analyses, and they're like, you know, I spent 3 hours reading this paper and I still don't know how to represent my data because they didn't tell me that. And it's true, they didn't tell you that because that's not what they were trying to do with that paper. And yet, if you absorb it, it changes you, and then you can do that work. But there's not really a shortcut. There isn't an easy button to press. And so I actually think that what a good next step is to pick a kind of data that you're interested in enough that you're willing to spend the time to get to know it from all angles, the data itself, but then also what's known about that data and the context that it comes from, how people have looked at it, what people have seen, and it might take years. But if you pick something you're fascinated with, then it's fun. So, what actually, I guess my question to you, Dragan, is does that kind of resonate with your experience in your area of data mining, or is it just me?
No, it does resonate very well. I mean, even with me, and it's really like, you know, understanding, and I think also goes back to original George's question as well, is understanding like the domain itself, right? And especially in the areas such as education and learning, which is, and especially like learning analytics here, which is so interdisciplinary, which requires understanding not only different analytics techniques, but also understanding of different theoretical models and the frameworks that are associated or explaining different types of phenomena. Just before this meeting, Caroline and I had another meeting where we discussed many different types of interventions where we would like to use in future MOOCs and what could be improved based on these MOOCs, etc. And before even that meeting, I had another meeting with another group from Australia where a colleague ran a course with over 300 students. And he really had some great interventions in that course, and basically one would say, well, there are great data sources there, and we easily like generated 10, 15 different questions. So the then becomes like, how do you start digging into these types of data? What of these data are clear questions that can inform my practice? And very often in research, what of these questions can inform also some research? And then whenever we are talking about research, then we need to build on the existing theory. In terms of practice, we don't necessarily, well, we would ideally also like to have our practice driven by the empirical research and theoretical research as well, but at the same time, practice requires some practical problems. So for example, why learning analytics attracted so much attention by many administrators in academia is because it promised to also solve one of the pressing problems, and that problem is student retention. I'm personally not super excited just about that problem. It's a very important problem, but there are many additional types of problems. For example, instructors would like to see what is the effectiveness of their pedagogy, what is the effectiveness of something else. Therefore, being embraced into that problem that you are trying to solve is necessary. We can run as many of these types of analysis as we would like, but if we are decoupled from the context in which we are trying to interpret some of these data, becomes very difficult. In the context of data mining itself, I spent a lot of time, not nearly comparable to the amount of time and the research output that Caroline did in this area, but with a couple of my students, we also work on the analysis of discussion that is happening in online discussion boards. and we try to develop different types of classifiers. But no matter how you would like to stay decoupled, for example, from different linguistic features and so on, you eventually end up digging down and trying to see, these types of sentences can best represent these types of cognitive processes. Without that level of deep understanding, you cannot solve it. You can engineer as many beautiful features, as Ryan said, but also, as Ryan said, as well, feature engineering is also art, because you need to really go into that part and then connect it also with some underlying theories that we are trying to support with this type of a process.
Yeah, I agree. So we're just about at the end of this discussion, and I just want to say, I have been seeing comments on the forums from students in time zones where it's just not possible to come synchronously, and that they listen later. And I think some of those students feel a little bit lonely just listening to the sort of leftover version, as it were, in your refrigerator after your Thanksgiving meal. No, I shouldn't make that joke since you guys won't have celebrated Thanksgiving if you're in one of those time zones. But in any case, I just want to say we're thinking about you guys, and we care about you, and maybe we should have scheduled some of these at like midnight our time, so it would have been reasonable for our colleagues in Australia to join in. But anyway, we do care about you guys, and we want to see you on Twitter and in the discussion forums, and also the chat. So should we close for now?
Thanks very much, Karen.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.